Hello, Noir Vortex viewers, and welcome to First for a While, Funny Philosophy. Short story, 20 minutes, talk about a philosophical subject and essentially ramble. So there's not many cuts or any, and just talk about that subject, whatever it may be. So the subject for today's vlog is, so I'm quite excited about this one because I'm quite into Cyberpunk. It's very interesting to me. So yeah, let's see where we can take this. So Cyberpunk, let's just define it. It's becoming very popular now. Actually, it's sort of having a resurgence from the 80s in some respects. So Cyberpunk is a term used generally to refer to fictions where it originates from, as far as I'm aware. Early examples of cyberpunk include things like Neuromancer by William Gibson, also like anime like Akira, certainly Ghost in the Shell, film, The Matrix has got cyberpunk elements, and many other, and also artistically there's another sort of an aesthetic to it which we'll dive into a bit more later. So what is the aesthetic? I'll sort of talk about that first maybe. Sort of sets the scene in the atmosphere. So generally the neon lights, obviously very dark environments, futuristic but dark. I mean, essentially it's defined by a sort of pessimistic, dark corporations and corporate control of information is a huge topic within cyberpunk. Sort of an underclass and an elite. There's often a very marked class conflict within cyberpunk. So you have very, very poor underclass like thieves, or very desperate underclass in some respects, and then you have like the elites and the corporations who are quite the opposite of that, but corrupt and very rich. So there's very much a sort of, you could say arguably there's very much a critique of extreme forms of capitalism within the fictional genre of cyberpunk. You could certainly go down the line that it's a critique of capitalism. That's not, outside the boundaries of imagination. That's probably quite valid, I suppose, in some respects. But it doesn't provide an alternative or anything. It's just very much set in this dark, technologically advanced society. Obviously, a lot of tropes within cyberpunk are computer hackers. So it's sort of like your hackers, underground group of hackers who, I mean, Neuromancer had that in it, where you have like a sort of a hacker. I mean, another thing is control of information, controlled by corporations, and social unrest is often another factor in a lot of cyberpunk literature and media. So the idea of an unease under the surface of a supposed order. So, I mean, like in a lot of respects, a lot of cyberpunk stories, so this is just a bit weird, I just had this thought earlier, but a lot of sci-fi stories are sort of a futuristic version of something like the Weimar Republic, where there's a lot of progression happening, but also a lot of regression in some respects. Obviously, if you know German history, then you know the Weimar Republic was pre the Nazis rising to power. So I mean, that's sort of a weird example. It's a weird parallel maybe to draw, but I just had that idea when just trying to think of some historical, sort of like Metropolis is almost a prototypal. Metropolis by Fritz Lang is almost a prototypal cyberpunk film in many respects as well, which was made around that brewing of time in history. So if you want to check out a really interesting old film, which was arguably one of the first sci-fi films, and I would argue it's sort of cyberpunk. It's not canon. It's not, strictly speaking, a cyberpunk film, but I think all the sort of elements that make a cyberpunk story, social unease, advanced technology, unrest, robotics and machines and AI. That's another thing to mention as well. So yeah, in Cyberpunk, obviously you have there's advanced technology, so that often involves robotics, often involves artificial intelligence, neural networks, that sort of thing. So I mean, it's Cyberpunk as a genre is, because I'm into computer science, I'm into art and aesthetics and stuff like that. It's sort of tailor-made for me to enjoy and savor, which I do. I really love a lot of the Cyberpunk media. Notable Cyberpunk films, obviously I've sort of mentioned Akira, Ghost in the Shell, The Matrix is a huge one. There's many examples actually. Altered Carbon's a good Cyberpunk series actually. That's a contemporary one. I've only seen series 1, but series that's the sort of like detective noir. So and also, yeah, Blade Runner of course is a classic Cyberpunk setting and story. That's another trope that sort of exists in Cyberpunk, as well as the detective / noir updated into story updated into the future. In the place of Blade Runner, it's replicants. Blade Runner is a very clever story, I think, because it deals with, it was Phillip K Dick originally, but because it deals with what is the soul and how do we define what the soul is and how do we define our consciousness and all this sort of thing. It's a very thought-provoking film. It sticks with you forever, I think. Just the way everything's shot as well. The cinematography in that film is so beautiful. Like, I watched it at the cinema recently and it was just, it's mind-blowing. Just seeing it on the big screen. I've seen it on the big screen twice actually, but and the new version is quite good as well, the sequel. But yeah. So philosophically, what is Cyberpunk's whole gist? So there's generally a strain of anti-authoritarianism running throughout and a rebellion. I mean, the clues in the title of Cyberpunk, punk is, you know, associated with rebellion. It's associated with non-conformity. It's associated with undercurrents in society, and that's the punk element of Cyberpunk. I think is that anti-authoritarianism, because generally a lot of the stories deal, like in the Matrix, for example, you're talking about a group of, a lot of them are misfits actually in the society, and then they realise something's wrong, and then they get unplugged. Oh, spoiler alert, probably if you've not seen the Matrix, but who hasn't? Then they get unplugged, and then there's this band of sort of ragtag rebels trying to stop this machine, rebel against the machines. I guess Terminator 2 actually is sort of a cyberpunk film in some respects, borderline, but I think it does have cyberpunk elements, like the cybernetics, the machine, not strictly speaking the most canon thing. And of course, I guess I cannot go into this thing without dealing with the big one, which is Cyberpunk 2077, which actually I've not played, so I can't really talk about it that much, but I have seen some videos about it, and in terms of the game world, it's a prime example of an ambitious open world game with cyberpunk aesthetics. I can't comment on that much because Deus Ex Machina, Deus Ex and Deus Ex 2 and all the other associated sequels are probably not. I can't compare them to Cyberpunk because I've not played it, but they're really good games. Deus Ex is a game where you basically cybernetically enhanced human being. There's also, yeah, another thing I should mention about Cyberpunk: cybernetic enhancements. So there's often a transhuman, post-human element to it as well. So it's like in Blade Runner, the replicants. There is a very marked exploration of transformation of the body, transformation of the self, consciousness, through whether it be mind uploading, whether it be neurologically enhancing yourself, whether it be physically enhancing yourself. There's a lot of that running through cyberpunk culture, cyberpunk literature, cyberpunk films. So there's a very interesting mix of a lot of ideas. It's a very philosophical genre as well. Probably one of the most philosophically charged genres of science fiction, because yeah, you've got all these different frontier paradigm shifting technologies that are explored commonly in sci-fi cyberpunk literature. Like I said, like the AI, computer science stuff, hacking, cybernetic enhancement, and post-humanism. Post-humanism is sort of a it's Nietzschean thing in a lot of ways. So that sort of emerges from the idea of the Übermensch, post-humanism, and transhumanism. It's not strictly related, but there is a connection there. So yeah, it's interesting. There's also a lot of drugs and sort of subculture exploration in cyberpunk. So it sort of does interestingly explore the underbelly of any. Well, in some cases, these are societies which may claim to be perfect, but extremely controlled and rigid, and sort of not under the surface of all these subcultures bubble up. So culturally, it's very interesting phenomenon in the stories. So yeah, I mean, obviously I've mentioned William Gibson, but I guess Phillip K Dick counts as a cyberpunk author on some level, though he's not as sort of canon in this as William Gibson. And there's also Snow Crash, which I've not read actually, but that's a very popular, well-known cyberpunk novel. But I've not read it. I need to read it actually. But yeah, cyberpunk music. So I'm just going to try and go into everything. I've got to speak for 20 minutes on these things. So this tends to be quite an underground thing. I guess obviously, as you'd expect, it's very electronic music. I mean, if you could call anything cyberpunk music. But there are certainly artists who explore those territories, like one not that well-known artist that I know actually, which I was quite into for a while. I've actually seen live, was Velvet Acid Christ. He produces electronic music, often with a very dark edge to it, and I think that is one of the key components in any like sort of cyberpunk music, if you will. Is like dark elements, symphonic. That's more of an abstract subject actually, and probably not, like I said, strictly canon speakable. But I think it is in some respects. So like cyberpunk influence does occur in music as well as any other thing. Cyberpunk has had somewhat of a resurgence in the last few years, really. So I think that's a lot to do with Cyberpunk 2077 getting released. Also Ghost in the Shell, also Blade Runner, so the new Blade Runner film. So there's been quite a few films and media released which are deeply inspired or a continuation of a story, like Blade Runner's case, which is brilliant. I mean, I love the sequel 2097. It's so beautifully shot. I mean, and the story and everything else. I won't have a nerdgasm about that here. So there's no point in this video. But Ghost in the Shell remake was a bit disappointing. I was a big fan of the original anime, but I mean, I actually watched the remake in 3D, and whilst that was impressive, it wasn't all I'd hoped, and they sort of butchered some of the story. But that's by the by. Ghost in the Shell is an amazing anime. I'm sure everyone has heard of it, but if you haven't, then please go out and watch it. Get it on streaming or whatever. That's a story that deals, like I said before, deeply with issues of consciousness. Like, so there's a machine with human brain, cyborg basically, Major Kusanagi, and basically they have to find this AI that's gone rogue. And it's cinematography, well, it's animation really, but the way everything sort of is animated just looks so incredible. There's a very artistic way that it's presented, basically. And that aesthetically, in terms of cyberpunk, there is very much an artistic current to it. It is a very artistic medium of expression. A lot of the time, because you really have to use your imagination and sort of project it like to a far future. A lot of the design work and the sort of costume design or illustration that comes out, which is cyberpunk influenced, is like mind-blowingly imaginative, and a really interesting melding of the old and the new, and the current contemporary. So, and I think in a lot of ways the reason why cyberpunk is so popular like right now is because we're sort of accelerating into something like a cyberpunk society. I'm going to go more into the parallels between cyberpunk and the existing world we live in right now. So big theme in cyberpunk is like sort of surveillance through technology. Now anybody with any degree of knowledge about the current ways that we are tracked, our data is being fed into huge server farms and everything else. And we are so a lot of the things that were written about in Cyberpunk, not on an as extreme a level, but some of them are actually coming true. Like the sort of, I mean, I've just watched an Adam Curtis documentary actually about, the new one. What was it called? Can't get you out of my head. I just watched episode 6 of that, and it goes into some degree on about sort of surveillance systems and work in China, where you basically can be tracked everywhere on cameras, and it's actually terrifying, to be honest, because leaves you no space for. I mean, you can sort of see it, if we go in a certain direction as a society, how we could devolve into a sort of cyberpunk, society. Also, of course, big tech giants have got a sort of very big monopoly on technology. The 4 big ones, the FANG, or 5 or whatever it is. FANG have got a huge monopoly on technology, and monopoly and corporatism in Cyberpunk's a big factor in the sort of makeup of it, as I said before. So yeah, I mean, what am I going to say? There is. God, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, there is like there's parallels with the world we're living in, the world that's emerging as well, with and obviously the technoculture. I mean, the sort of hacking culture is like, I'm a programmer. I'm sort of involved in that world. Like I love that world. That's where I was brought up. That's where the nerdy sort of geeky techno hacktivist sort of world is, like sort of where I was brought up in this sort of global internet. And of course, can't believe the lessons to the end. The internet, or the Neuromancer was sort of almost in a lot of ways predicted the internet. Didn't exactly get the way it was interfaced correctly, but who knows? Maybe it'll go sort of. Jonny Mnemonic is a Cyberpunk film. I said Keanu Reeves as well, like him from The Matrix, which is quite cheesy in some ways, but there's a good bit in that if you want to see some cyberpunk scenes where he basically explores this like sort of virtual reality environment. I'll also post it in the background of this video, I think. But yeah, virtual reality is another factor in Cyberpunk 2 as well. And there's a lot of Cyberpunk stories, so the idea of that's what it's like, very Phillip K Dick thing of like reality versus the virtual, the simulated and the simulacra and all that sort of thing. Obviously, how do you say his name? Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard, the guy who did Simulation and Simulacra, is big influence, I guess, postmodern writer on a lot of cyberpunk writers, because his primary philosophical thrust of his ideas was that everything's just becoming a simulation of something that used to be real. It's the sort of critique of consumer capital, which a lot of cyberpunk is. It's a not even veiled critique of consumer capitalism, and taken to an extreme. So almost done the 20 minutes now. I'll try and think of something else just to wrap this up. So yeah, basically Cyberpunk's amazing. I've given you some sort of things you can look at if you're not already familiar with Cyberpunk. I've sort of talked about contemporary parallels, and also just talked about the aesthetics and everything else. I think that's probably enough. I mean, I've already talked now for 20 minutes. It feels like 5. Coffee and Burger King, like the corporate whore that I am. But, okay, I guess I'll leave it at that. Almost going to be exactly bang on the 20 mark, which is good. What I like. I've been Vortex. Like and subscribe if you like it. I know these videos are quite unusual in some respects. It's someone talking for 20 minutes, just stream of consciousness, but that's what I do. So if you like that still on YouTube, subscribe. Alright, bye.